Welcome to episode number 17 of the Kevin Rooke Show. Today's conversation is with Keyan Kousha, the founder of Stacker News. Now, for those who don't know, Stacker News is kind of like the front page of Bitcoin on the internet. It's very similar to Reddit or Hacker News. It's Bitcoin specific though, and it has a few key differences. One of those differences is that users actually tip each other Bitcoin in order to upvote content. So if you're posting great content to Stacker News, you are earning Bitcoin for it. In our conversation, we covered some of the problems with social media today, some of the challenges that Stacker News is trying to overcome, and how the Lightning Network helps Stacker News get there. We also cover Stacker News' growth. They launched about 6 months ago and have been on a tear since then. And we cover some of the other aspects of what Stacker News is building. Specifically, we talk about Web of Trust. We talk about building a reputation that you own. We talk about decentralizing Stacker News and all sorts of Lightning related topics. Since this is episode number 17, I'm also going to be giving away 1,700 sats to a commenter, someone who sends in a comment over the Lightning Network, because of course this is a Lightning podcast. Make sure you include your Lightning address, by the way, if you send in a comment. We'll get into that at the end of the show though. And just a quick shout out before we get into the episode. This episode is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Hope you enjoy the episode. Keyan, thanks for coming on the show today. How's it going?
It's going well. Rainy day in Austin today, but it's nice.
Yeah, you're building out of you're in Austin in a place called Pleb Lab, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what you guys are building there, because it's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, we're debating what to call ourselves, but Kyle and Carr, who are the other people who started Pleb Lab with me, they're calling it an accelerator, specifically for Bitcoin. So we have like 10 Bitcoiners in an office. Some of them are building startups. Some of them work for startups in Bitcoin, like Voltage and Impervious AI. Most of them are creating their own startups, though. So we have like John from Zap, right? We have Tristan and Super from Lightning Escrow, and a few other companies too. But we're just a bunch of Bitcoiners together working in an office. It's about 200 square feet. It's like a bunch of sardines in a can, really. And we're just kind of in there riffing off each other, building off each other's momentum. The whole idea was I just wanted to spend more time with Bitcoiners, and I realized other people did too. And as a solo founder, it's really nice to be around other people creating stuff, because because then I'm not really solo founding anymore. I have like emotional support. I have technical support potentially in areas that I'm not very sophisticated. It's just a great concept. I don't think we realized it would be as useful to all of us as it is, but it's awesome.
Nice. And so let's rewind a little bit before joining Pleb Lab and before even starting Stacker News. What was the impetus behind deciding you wanted to build Stacker News, you needed to build this, and you need to build it on Lightning? What was that kind of thought process?
Yeah, so I've been building applications for a number of years. I like on my own, like founding various projects and things, and like before Stacker News, I was working on like Pinterest for doctors with a doctor friend of mine. So I was building that. I built a few other things. Like I was trying to build a decentralized GitHub. Got interviewed for YC, was rejected because I had been working on this image thing for this Pinterest for doctors thing. They didn't like that I was distracted. But I have a history of kind of building these projects on my own. And then I moved to Austin in January of last year. I went to my first BitDevs. At that time, it was about 20 people, and I really enjoyed it. It felt like I was like in an episode of *Halt and Catch Fire*, if you've ever seen that show on AMC. But it's like a show from like it's a fictional depiction of the early internet. So internet has just launched, PCs are just beginning to happen, and it's like a group of misfits that are building things on, like building PCs, building early internet stuff. And I felt like I was like at that BitDevs meetup, I felt like I was in an episode of that show. I just felt like super energized. There's something very serious happening here in terms of like the impact of what's going to happen. It made me want to just work in Bitcoin exclusively. And I felt like after I'd been around all these people who I realized were like flesh and blood humans, that maybe working in Bitcoin on Bitcoin was something I could be doing possibly. Before I thought maybe it'd be like unapproachable as a concept, but being there really changed that for me. And then it was after the next BitDevs I decided I was going to focus on working on Bitcoin. Like I didn't want to do anything else with my time, and so I was certain I wanted to work in Bitcoin. And then even prior to moving to Austin, I wanted a community like what I found in Austin. I was looking to be able to communicate with other people about Bitcoin outside of Twitter, where it's like dominated by memes and kind of a lot of like infighting and just like the overall, there's very noisy on Twitter and not really a strong community in my opinion. And then you have things like Bitcoin Talk, which are like this very vintage kind of Bitcoin software that is filled with like lots of spam and is heavily moderated. And so that wasn't much of a community for me either. But one of the communities I really enjoyed being on was Hacker News. So I've been a huge fan of Hacker News for a long time. The signal's very high, the community is very strong, but they're very cryptophobic. So I couldn't find any Bitcoin or even just like general blockchain stuff on Hacker News, even though it's clearly like this massive industry that's doing very well and is obviously tech related. So I was frustrated. I think even before moving to Austin, I'd posted on Hacker News itself. I asked them like, where can I find something like Hacker News for like crypto Bitcoin stuff? And got a few responses, none of which were very helpful. So I knew what I wanted didn't exist. And then I kept going to BitDevs, and I was talking to Ben Carmen, who works at the Bitcoin company now and previously worked at SuredBits, he runs the Austin BitDevs meetup, and I had told him that I wanted to be up to date with stuff that's happening in Bitcoin, know about everything that's on Bitcoin, and I was just frustrated about my lack of ability to find such a thing online. And he said, "Well, you have to sit on Reddit and Twitter all day, and that's how you're gonna be able to do this." And I'm like, I don't really want to do that. And I was looking for a project in Bitcoin or Lightning, like I said before, because I wanted to work in it. And so I was like, all right, I'll build Hacker News for Bitcoin. That's what I'll do. And Sphinx Chat had recently come on my radar, and I knew that was a thing. And I was very intrigued by this idea of Sybil resistance. And I knew Hacker News and all of these social media problems have a huge issue with spam. So I'm like, I'm going to build a Hacker News that integrates Lightning, does everything with Lightning that it could possibly do, takes advantage of every aspect of Lightning. And one of these aspects was Sybil resistance. I think the kind of first feature that Stacker News had. Every post, every comment costs costs 1 sat, a very small amount of Bitcoin. And also that also guarantees that the user is familiar with Bitcoin and is comfortable using it. So that kind of creates like a little bit of resistance, a little gate, make sure the community is actually engaged with Bitcoin. I don't want to get too far in the product because we're probably going to discuss that more, but that was kind of the beginning of Stacker News, and then it kind of got better reception than I was even planning at first, and then we raised funding, and the rest is kind of in the works right now.
That's amazing. Would it be fair to say that Austin is the Bitcoin capital of the world?
I know everyone calls it that. I don't know where. There might be more populous cities that have more Bitcoiners in them, but I think like I don't know how you would say it, but like per capita interest in Bitcoin is probably highest, I would say, in Austin relative to anywhere else. Like we were on Rainy Street, which is like this popular kind of bar street that has a lot of like food trucks and things like on it, and we were using this app called Oshi on it. To buy stuff at a food truck, and there was just a random person sitting in there is like, oh, you guys are using Lightning to buy stuff at this food truck. Like there's a lot of Bitcoiners in Austin. These meetups are like 200 people at their largest, 250 people. It's like a monthly conference almost at both BitDevs and now Austin Bitcoin Club, which is like a little less technical, a little more casual. But I would definitely say Austin has a great Bitcoin scene, and I'm not aware of one that's any bigger or better.
Right. That's very cool. And I bet it's must be helpful to have. I mean, I know you guys have Pleb Lab where you can speak with Bitcoiners on a daily basis and you can kind of work closely with them. But I imagine it's great for innovation to have an entire city that is embracing this technology and kind of like supporting it, and to see that it's almost like transcending into the mainstream talk. If you got people at food trucks recognizing Lightning payments, that's a pretty cool sign, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a bonus. It was one of the reasons why I moved here to begin with, because I knew the Bitcoin community here was more significant than where I was in California. So, it ended up growing a lot even after I got here. But yeah, it's huge. It's very important, I think.
That's very cool. Okay, so let's start with Stacker News, the product. You mentioned one of the first things you did to kind of like improve the experience that you might find on Hacker News or Reddit, was to add this Sybil resistance, this one sat payment. You gotta at least show that you can make a tiny payment in order to participate. What are some of the lessons you got from that, actually deploying that and seeing how people use that? And then maybe talk a little bit about like what some of the other features are that you're integrating right now, that kind of diverge or separate you from Hacker News and Reddit.
Yeah. I guess there aren't any negative learnings from Sybil resistance. I think, or integrating Bitcoin payments this way, because the community I'm trying to appeal to is like completely comfortable with this concept. They understand how Bitcoin can help solve a problem like this. They've seen Sphinx Chat. They're using Sphinx Chat. They're using Lightning regularly. So given that it was made for them and that feature kind of suits them, it seems to be working as intended. Some users have said that it might be discouraging a little bit, like there might be a little too much resistance behind having to pay to comment. But I think the denomination is so small, I have a hard time believing that has a significant impact. And that's sort of the goal anyway. Like if you don't really want to say something, then you're probably not going to want to pay for it. And that's good for the community, because then my attention doesn't have to be brought to a piece of content that isn't good. So it appears the signal is strong, but that might be just a function of the community already being small. So it's kind of too hard to tell how it'll shake out in the long run. A lot of users, when they come on to Stacker News for the first time, they haven't really used Lightning because they're not in Austin. They're not hanging out with other Bitcoiners who are paying for each other's beers with Lightning and transacting regularly in Lightning. So for a lot of them, the UX around onboarding is a little bit difficult. Like paying an invoice or withdrawing via an invoice can be complicated. There are a variety of like enhancements that have come out of the community more recently, like LNURL stuff, and then the Lightning address stuff. But that like onboarding new users is maybe one of the resistance points, like getting them to fund their wallet. But I don't see that.
So just in case there are new users or potential new users listening to this, can we just do like a quick run through of exactly how the Stacker News product works? Like it costs 1 sat to comment on a post. It costs 1 sat to make a post, and it costs 1 sat at least, or potentially more if you change your settings, to upvote a post, right?
Yeah.
And then where does that money go? That money then is sent from the user's wallet. Where does it go, and how does it get distributed back to users?
Yeah. So that one sat to post and that 1 sat to comment, that goes to Stacker News. So that very nominal fee goes to Stacker News. because that, like, game theoretically, that's the best way for it to work out, is that there's like a sink somewhere that you trust that's getting that money, that isn't another user or another sock puppet account or anything like that. And then as far as like the upvotes, those are all, or we call them tips, but it's kind of like an upvote on Reddit or Hacker News, and the amount that you upvote or the amount of sats you can put into a post or tip is variable. You can set that to what you want, but you need to do it needs to cost you at least 1 sat to upvote something. So an upvote is a way the upvote, the sat that it costs to upvote or tip goes directly to the user who posted or commented. And then that also affects the ranking. So you're saying, not only are you saying, I want this user to have a sat for showing me this content that I like, I also want more users to be able to see this post. And the fact that it costs you something guarantees that you have a little more skin in the game for this piece of content than you would otherwise. Like you care about it a little more than you might if it were free, if all it did was really cost you a click. And so that's kind of interesting. But all the tips, all the upvotes on a post or comment go directly to the user. So whoever put that content up gets them. So we have users regularly earning, I don't know, right now it's like around at the high end 2,000 sats. We have had AMAs where people really, really like them and are really into them, where Gigi, for instance, earned over 100,000 sats, Jimmy Song over 50,000 sats, John Val is over 50,000 sats he earned on doing an AMA. So
that's incredible.
But it's like,
and
so
this is just from people upvoting.
Just from upvoting, just from tipping. So there's like a little lightning icon next to every post or comment, and you can hit it as many times as you want, or hold it and put in a custom amount and tip even more. Yeah.
And so let's think about this idea of tipping for content, because it's clearly found product market fit with at least the community of Bitcoin developers and Bitcoin enthusiasts right now. The site metrics continue to grow every month. I follow along. You have an open metrics on your site. But how can we extend this, and like what other problems on the internet can be solved with a similar mechanic, or maybe even the same mechanic? Like, can this idea of requiring someone to post up 1 sat in order to make a post on Twitter, could that work there? Could it work on Facebook? Could it work across social media on chat forums? Could it work on content creators like blogs and paywalled content for newsletters and newspapers? How far can this idea expand on the internet?
I in my opinion, it can expand everywhere. It's just getting people familiar with Lightning and Bitcoin, and then having a decent UX around it to make it work. Like Sailor on Twitter has talked about, he has kind of a different idea around how this might work, but he wants users to put up like upfront, put up like $20 worth of Bitcoin to start an account on Twitter. And what's kind of nice about that relative to like a credit card payment or something is that's global. Twitter's user base is global, so is Bitcoin. It makes sense that it makes more sense to use something like Bitcoin than it would a credit card payment for such a mechanism. And then the fact that you can kind of you can send around very small amounts that cost very little means that you really don't need the upfront payment like that. It could just be on a per post basis, in my opinion, and then it kind of scales to the user's usage. But I mean, the original, the way I view Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is kind of like a tokenized energy in a way. And so a Satoshi is like a small amount of tokenized energy. And so you're really in a way, you're kind of sending around energy to other people, something that costs something that was real in the world. Hashcash, which was kind of one of the these predecessor big ideas behind Bitcoin that Adam Beck, I believe, invented or discovered. He intended that to be used for email, for like remailers, to make sure these email lists didn't get a bunch of spam on them. And so it's very natural to imagine Bitcoin or Lightning being like a tokenized version of this kind of thing that Adam Beck created for spam, being used to prevent spam on the internet. And I hope
that
we
a
see
big idea waiting to be done right now? Email having a SAT limit. Why has no one done this to date? Or maybe they have, but they haven't succeeded at it. Do you think that's another application for using Bitcoin? Is today you could have a spam filter that you can't get into my inbox unless you pay 10 sats?
I think so. I think the problem with a lot of the only thing that would, I think, prevent that idea from gaining widespread adoption is like Bitcoin and Lightning adoption itself. It's like, while it's growing, it's still not growing a lot. Like, a user shared on Stacker News the other day, like a kind of like a visual graph of all of allocations of Bitcoin across the network. And it showed like how much capacity is on Lightning right now. It's something like 3,000 and something Bitcoin. But then relative to something like MicroStrategy's holding of Bitcoin, it's tiny. It's so while I'm very bullish on Lightning and Bitcoin, like Lightning adoption, I think has a long way to go before like true ubiquity. And if you're not targeting your applications, at least in the early stages, to Bitcoiners, it might have problems. And something like email, it kind of needs you don't want to force your counterparty in the email, the person who's sending you email, to be a Bitcoiner yet, because there just aren't enough of us, I don't think. But I think eventually that will certainly happen. I can't imagine it not happening. It's just a matter of when, and I think right now it might be too early, but yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, in terms of Lightning user experience, you guys are already implementing some cool features that make that an easier on-ramp for someone who's new to Bitcoin. One of those is Lightning addresses. So for example, on Stacker News, like I'm at KR on Stacker News. So you just created a Lightning address for me when I made my account. It's kr@stacker.news. And that is the way I can fund or withdraw my account. Now, talk to me about how people are using that today. Are people finding that to be a useful addition over something like an invoice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the UX around it is certainly easier. It makes sending Bitcoin around as easy as sending an email. So all you need to know is someone's Lightning address, kind of like their email address, and you specify an amount, kind of like you would specify maybe a subject and a body in an email, and then you hit send, and they then get Bitcoin. That's pretty much it. Yeah, it's a cool thing. I think created by Andrew Neves at Zebedee, the CTO of Zebedee, and it's very widely adopted at this point. More and more wallets are adding this feature, I think, because users want it. QR codes are just kind of, I mean, the user experience isn't great. I need a camera. I need to have, like, if I don't have a camera and I'm on a computer, it's very hard for me to pay an invoice. So it makes a lot more sense to just do the Lightning address.
Yeah, totally. What do you think is the biggest problem that users still face on Stacker News? Like, if Lightning addresses are smooth and easy, and that's kind of like what seems to be the best way to onboard someone to Lightning today, what are some of the constraints? What are some of the challenges of getting people onboarded to Stacker News to becoming an active user?
Yeah, I guess one of the problems is that a user has to have Bitcoin. They have to have Bitcoin deployed in a Lightning channel, either through a Lightning service provider or on their own wallet or something, to be able to even fund the account. So they might be like, I've had several users who are familiar with Bitcoin, but using Lightning is kind of new to them. So they might have Bitcoin, but they don't have Lightning yet. And there's some, there are ways to onboard them more easily, like Moon, like kind of use all Bitcoin as kind of the same, and whether it's Lightning or on chain, it kind of doesn't care. And that's a very nice user experience. So that's maybe one of the bigger hurdles, is that a user has to like already have access to some capacity on Lightning to begin using Stacker News.
Now, when I made my account on Stacker News, I think I got 2 free posts. Is that still the case today?
Yeah, you get 2 free posts, 5 free comments. So the idea was like maybe you aren't familiar with Lightning, but you want to begin interacting with the community, see how it works. And then my hope was, you're a good user, you think, and you post something good, and you basically can bootstrap an account balance that allows you to kind of like go into the future with that account without ever having to like put any capital in.
Right. So if you make that first free post or second free post, and it's a good post, and someone upvotes it, gives you like 10 sats, then you've got 10 sats that you can make 10 future posts on, and you can kind of like grow from there, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are earning like a decent amount of money in sat terms in the Lightning space from doing this. Like it's quite cool to see how quickly you can earn Bitcoin, and how for example, I posted a couple of posts on Stacker News in the last few weeks. I posted basically the exact same post on Twitter. And I noticed that a couple of times I'd get like 30 or 40 likes on Twitter for those posts, and I'd get like 30 or 40 sats on Stacker News for the same posts. And I'm like, if that's a trade-off where I have to start, I have to take either 1 sat or 1 like, I'm taking sats every day. And that is a really compelling pitch. If that relationship holds as Stacker News grows and as more users come on board, man, that's a really compelling way to get people excited. Like as you mentioned, one of the largest posts got over 100,000 sats, right? For an AMA.
Yeah. And so I imagine, if you look at kind of Reddit and like what are some of the top posts on Reddit and how many upvotes Redditors get when they post something, it's in the neighborhood of like 20,000 upvotes for like something that's really hot, really high on the page. So at least a couple months ago it was like 2,000 sats per dollar. So that would earn $10. You could post something on Stacker. If we get to that amount of kind of tipping and upvoting on Stacker News, you can imagine users making like a real maybe they could pay their electricity bill or their food bill for the month posting on Stacker News, and hopefully we'll be able to add features in the future where they can earn even more if they do more things. So
yeah, and that's $10, by the way, at current prices.
Right.
If you get to the point where you got as many users as Reddit, then you'd assume that would mean Bitcoin is already a much bigger success than it is today, and price maybe 10x higher, 100x higher, whatever it is, and
right.
Then your $10 turns into 100 or 1,000, and yeah, that's some real money from curating content, because it doesn't even have to be an original post,
No.
right? Like you just got to find something on the internet, feed it to the community, and say, hey, here, look at this. Do you think this creates a new kind of job? Like, is this a new category of income potentially as it matures and as this scales? Like, do you think there will be a job title for curators on the internet?
I would like to see that happen. I think that'd be awesome. I think one thing the internet has done is freed people from kind of like the shackles of like a corporate job. And especially in the last couple of years, we've seen these huge shifts to like these creator economy things, and people being able to earn money for more and more things that they would normally have to do under the umbrella of another organization. So, I certainly hope that's the case. That's kind of where I want Stacker News to go, is for users to be able to really engage in various types of commerce, perhaps types of commerce that couldn't exist previously because there's a little too much friction in a normal payment system, or it didn't really make sense for Reddit to pay users for simply discovering content, but with like crowding micropayments and aggregating them, and maybe there's something really there in terms of like a user being able to receive some of the value that they're creating for the community.
And do you think that that could even grow the size of this like aggregator pie? Like you have Reddit with, I don't know, whatever, 50 million users or however many they have. Do you think that by enabling these micro payments and actually letting people earn, you can then take that from 50 million to 500 million, similar to how like on, I know one of the cited metrics for traders is like Robinhood cut out all the fees on trading, took it from like $10 per trade on a stock to zero, and just like created a whole new class of traders, and just, you know, this whole new generation of traders that otherwise wouldn't have been willing to pay $10 a trade to their bank can now participate. And it's just like the economy is larger in that trading sphere. Do you think that happens in the kind of content curation sphere as well?
I mean, I think it's a compelling idea, and I can certainly imagine it happening. I mean, what you end up doing is like you're like on somewhere like Reddit, the incentives are kind of weak. They're not really tangible. They don't really exist outside of the Reddit ecosystem. So I can't turn my Reddit karma into anything special nearly anywhere else. I mean, no one cares about my Reddit karma even on Twitter. If I say I'm like a high karma Redditor on Twitter, it just doesn't. No one cares. It doesn't necessarily get me a bunch of Twitter followers, but the incentives around like giving people actual money, something that's like really worth something. Like now where I might have just lurked on somewhere like Reddit and not really contributed, now I'm thinking about, wow, I want to be one of these people that are actually earning some money doing this. I'm already here. And I'm discovering a lot of content. I know what the community likes. I think I can do something here for the community. And so I think there's just enough more incentive for people to begin doing that. And especially if you can earn a decent amount of money. I mean, who doesn't want more bills paid? Especially if you're in a third world country. Bitcoin is nearly the same price everywhere, and so if you're in Africa right now, and you could probably maybe earn comparable wages on something like Stacker News posting on Stacker News to what you might be. I mean, depending on where you are in Africa, I don't know nothing about the African economy, but just like thinking about that is kind of interesting.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, even today, on like, for people who are already on Bitcoin Twitter, on Reddit talking about Bitcoin, on Bitcoin Talk, you're already posting for free. You're not getting anything for your money or for your time. I find the Stacker News is already a higher signal kind of community. Maybe it's because it's small. Maybe it's because it's developer focused and more tight knit. But TBD on whether that changes over time. But for now, I'm like, this is the best pitch for Bitcoiners, period. It's like, you're already posting this stuff on Twitter. Why not just add the link on Stacker News? You're already posting on Reddit. Why not earn sats instead of upvotes? Just seems like a no-brainer for at least the Bitcoin community right now.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree. I mean, we've had a number of users comment and say that they've reduced their Twitter usage as a result of Stacker News. So like a big reason why I spent a lot of time on Twitter previously was I was looking for signal in Bitcoin. I would scroll through my feed. I'd follow a bunch of lists, just like looking for what's going on and trying to keep up. And my Twitter usage has reduced. Like I rarely hit I have a 30-minute limit on Twitter that I allow myself every day. And I rarely hit it now. I'm mostly spending all of that time I was spending on Twitter on Stacker News now. And I've heard several of the users say the same thing. And I think one of the problems with Reddit, and I enjoy Reddit quite a bit, but as the communities get larger, the incentives get kind of weird. Like it begins rewarding like the lowest common denominating content. So it's kind of like in a very large classroom, we all kind of understand that that's maybe bad for the people who are learning there, because the teacher has to teach to the bottom of the class in order to make sure everyone's on the same page. And that's what you have on these kind of larger subreddits, especially the Bitcoin one. It's like 3.2 million users. I think it might even be bigger now. But the content ends up being things like, I sold all my Bitcoin to buy a house. I lost my keys. It's just it's a thing that appeals to like the simplest kind of user. And I think we can modify the incentives perhaps in that situation so that it actually doesn't appeal to the lowest common denominating person, and maybe we can improve the signal using Bitcoin.
Is that purely through this tipping mechanism and this like cost to post, or what are some of the other tools you're thinking about to improve the experience of a user?
Yeah, so you and I have actually talked about this privately. You actually gave me the suggestion because you'd recently talked to John Carvalho, interviewed John Carvalho, and listened to that podcast too. But he discussed
episode 8 for listeners.
Episode 8. He discusses Web of Trust, and it's a fascinating idea. But it basically aims to solve in like the public key infrastructure area. A very similar problem to what a lot of like modern social networks are. Like upon researching Web of Trust, I found out it was basically the first form of social network. It was a network that was social. It was a graph that was connecting people together. And so we've now created a ranking algorithm that uses this concept of Web of Trust. So we're quantifying basically the trust relationship between users, and then creating like a value for how much a user is trusted by the community that allows us to determine basically how trustworthy they are, and then how much should their upvote count for on a post? Should they be able to say this post is good or bad? Like maybe they're not. Maybe I'm Frank, and I created 3 other accounts. Frank 1, Frank 2, and Frank 3, and I post something on Stacker News, and then I upvote it. Well, Frank 1 and Frank 2 and Frank 3, no one trusts them, so they shouldn't have any say in whether something gets ranked higher. So that's kind of what this algorithm allows us to do. It really allows us to tell whether a user should be able to do certain things on the site or not. And it functions like way more similarly to a normal community or social structure. And I think it's a very nice fit for Stacker News and the community. And then another value add you might get from this is everyone might have a different Web of Trust. Like you, Kevin, might have users you trust more than me. Maybe you want maybe I want more technical content, and maybe you want other types of content that are more interesting to you, and you trust users for that type of content, and I trust technical users, and so maybe we see different content throughout the day. It's both which improves the signal for each of us individually, but it's a very nice way to do things. As far as I know, like Reddit and Hacker News, they have more of an absolute measure of trust where, this user's been on the site for 6 months. They comment 3 times a day. They have so much karma, but those are much easier to game than someone having or like a relationship, a content relationship with someone directly on the site. And so I think it's a really powerful idea. And I'm surprised I haven't heard about it being used in a social network yet. And I'm really excited about like the variety of ways we're going to end up using it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a mind-blowing idea when I heard John talk about it on the show. I think he used the example of when we were talking about it. He talked about the potential for like an Uber driver to build a reputation on some kind of decentralized Uber, where they build trust by doing successful rides, all tied to a key pair. And if that key pair, if they are a drunk driver and they get into an accident one day, then their reputation goes way down, and they have that opportunity to either try and repair that reputation on that same key pair or start with another one, in which case they go back to having 0 reputation, period. And they're getting paid the least amount. They get the worst times for rides. They have to build trust again. So yeah, I think that's a really, really cool idea. And there's a lot of ways to take this too, right? Like I know we've talked about the idea of like extending the trust. What can you do once you've determined how much you should trust certain people, like if everyone has a reputation score, what are some of the things that you can then use that reputation for? And like, can you add on new layers to the product once you have a reputation established? And I think one of the interesting ones that we've talked about a bit is the idea of like sending payments back to users as they as in proportion to their reputation as the site generates income. Like it's a really cool idea. I think it's a that to me is what like community owned social media should look like. Yeah, not someone trying to go out and get pre-sale tokens on some new social media service that hasn't launched, but someone who's actually using a product actually gets rewarded with actual income that the site is generating.
Yeah, for me, that's like the real definition of Web3 is just like the user is capturing more of the value they're generating. Like I think some people in kind of traditional Silicon Valley have the point of view that it's the user owns some asset on whatever blockchain, and the only reason why that might be interesting is if the user is somehow earning something as a result of owning that asset. And so I think that's really, it's really the earning part, is that the user is actually capturing value that they're generating as they're participating in this thing. And I think that's what Bitcoin, I think, and Lightning used in this way can do.
And right now, you're earning from people commenting and posting. You're earning sats there. What are some of the other applications where you can earn and then pass those payments back on to users in proportion to this like reputation or web of trust score?
Yeah, so we've also, I think this is another one of your ideas, just to suggest to users how many good ideas come from you, or ideas that we're going to be using come from you, but a job board. So we're thinking about doing a job board. I think one of the cool things about Lightning is using Lightning for something like a job board is you can rank things based on market dynamics. So like, how much is someone willing to pay on a job board to be in that top spot? Maybe, if it's dynamic, if it's a fee market, if it's something like, I'm CoinDesk and I'm willing to pay 10,000 sats for this top spot. Someone comes along and they want to pay 15,000 sats. Perhaps CoinDesk gets dropped down in the ranking. So traditional job boards, it's because they have no other mechanism to do this by. Everything is ranked by when it was posted to the board. So you have days of the week where the board is where they're not earning any income. They'll have to make their job postings cheaper or more expensive depending on the time of the week, because people who are posting jobs know that job seekers are looking on, say, Mondays or Tuesdays on their lunch breaks. So everything will have to be everything will be time ranked, and everyone's focused on when they're posting these jobs. And then maybe there's a mechanism where you can pay a little bit extra to get like kind of pinned to the top. But we can use Lightning to like set a very dynamic fee for how much an HR person is, say, paying to have a job posted in a certain spot, and we can pull from their wallet, say, like every minute, a small sat amount. So it can be very responsive and dynamic to like market conditions. And I think it'll be really interesting and potentially generate like a decent amount of revenue. And then we take that revenue and we dump it back on the users to kind of, pay them for what they're doing, for all the work they're doing on the site, and then incentivize more users to join. Yeah.
And that makes sense, because I think the idea of a job board and to make it a valuable thing, you have to have users to begin with, right? Like a job board doesn't mean anything if there's no one looking at the site. And so if you do have all these users looking at the site and then you now create a job board, it makes sense that you return that value to the users. And yeah, to me that seems like a great fit for Stacker News to be able to have those payments come in and then sent back to users in proportion to their reputation. Okay, so maybe we can talk more about decentralizing Stacker News, because this is another idea I've heard you talk a bit about. I don't fully understand the technical side of this, so you might have to slow this one down for me a little bit. But
Yeah.
talk to me about like how centralized is Stacker News now? Like in that tech stack, what are the components that are centralized? What are the components decentralized? And what are your plans over time to change that? And how much of that tech stack can be decentralized?
Yeah, so right now Stacker News is about as centralized as something like Twitter is. So it's pretty much a traditional web app. Everything is kind of centralized. The only thing that's decentralized, say, is the payment system we're using, which is Bitcoin. That's decentralized. The fact that I don't need to interact with some kind of third party to process your payment, that kind of stuff. But it's fairly traditional. The idea is, I think, when we get to, for me, like real product market fit, where there's quite a few users, it's getting quite significant to people's lives. That's when I think we cross the threshold where it begins to really make sense to begin decentralizing it. But basically, it would look like we have an app on something like Umbrel or any of these kind of node stores. And you run that app, you tell us all of the kind of subs, or you can kind of think of subreddits. We call them substacks. We might call them subs. We're not really sure yet because we don't have them. But you say all the topics to say you want to subscribe to there, and then it'll connect you just kind of like Bitcoin does itself. It'll connect to a variety of other nodes in the network, other Stacker News nodes, and then it will tell them you're listening for these specific topics. And it will send you all of the kind of posts. You could maybe you could set, I only want to see posts from the last 2 weeks. I don't want to store any very old like archive data. I just want to see the last 2 weeks posts. And so it basically operate like that. I think the best analogy for Bitcoiners is probably like it basically be like a mempool. It would kind of be like a mempool on your node where like you submit on Bitcoin, you submit a payment to someone else, and what your Bitcoin node does is it then sends it around to all of the other Bitcoin nodes, and eventually it reaches a miner, and that miner then puts it into a block. For something like Stacker News, it doesn't really need consensus. Like your node can have a different view than my node, and it doesn't really matter. Like you're interested in different topics than I am. So it's more like that pool that sits on every node that just has transactions that aren't in a block yet. And all of our nodes have these mempools sitting on them, but in Stacker News' case, it's like a news pool. It's like all of the posts that you're interested in are kind of sitting there, and you can also send those to other users potentially, and that's kind of the idea. So the only thing that really needs to be built in that case that's different from the current site, like the entire tech stack will run fine on your node right now. That's like some of the decisions I've been making sit with that. The only thing that would really need to change is we'd have to introduce some kind of way of passing messages between other computers. So like some kind of peer-to-peer communication. And then we have to figure out an incentive model that guarantees that when you want things from a certain topic, they're available for you on the network. Like the data is there for you to get it. And then also guarantee that someone can't spam you very well. So we already have this kind of Sybil resistant mechanism built in. So that aspect would remain in a decentralized version. But we gained a bunch of like cool things in a decentralized version, like this idea of like censorship resistance. Like if someone creates a board, say in a country where the government is very repressive, in this case, they're about as free as they are to use Stacker News as they are to use Bitcoin. So the goal is to have something open peer-to-peer as like similarly decentralized as Bitcoin. It probably take us a long time to get there. Bitcoin, when it started, wasn't very decentralized. It had tens of nodes and then more and more and more. But that's kind of the general idea. And then you have like this trust minimized, censorship resistant message board where people are earning money for participating in it, and your participation doesn't rely on Stacker News continuing to exist necessarily. It just relies on you running your own data and making sure the data that you're getting has the rules that you want it to. Yeah, I think it's a potential future, and I think an interesting thing to consider. And I think a way that we can use Lightning is providing some of these things that are hard to do without Lightning, like creating an open peer-to-peer kind of data store where you might get a bunch of spam in the case where you just have a computer that can receive a bunch of connections and things like that.
So this structure of like nodes passing information, like Stacker News posts back and forth to each other, do you think that is the solution for creating a censorship-free internet? Like, can that then be applied to Twitter? And can you recreate some of these apps that we know and love today in a way that cannot be censored?
I think so. I think that is the future of these applications, is to use digitally native payments, Bitcoin, et cetera, to kind of create the incentive structure that's necessary for these things to exist in a way that Bitcoin created an incentive structure that allows it to exist in a decentralized way and operate and not be easily destroyed, even though it's decentralized. I think that'll happen. I think, and as we were talking earlier, potentially attaching Lightning payments to email might be able to solve some of the problems with spam and email. And similarly, these open peer-to-peer networks have spam problems too. That's like one of the main things they need to solve, is the ability to reduce, denial of service attacks that are created by spam. And by attaching payments, you can kind of solve for that.
And do you think the node, like someone's Lightning node or Bitcoin node, will be the central hub by which they access all these new services, or will it be something else?
I mean, you could have a variety, or you could support any model. So in my view, there will still be a centralized Stacker News. There'll be a node, and I keep an archive. I'm an archival node. I'm a full node for Stacker News. I keep all of the topics, everything that is like that I'm not forced to by law to remove or anything. I keep that alive and well. But then you can have another version of it that operates more like a Sphinx chat or a Zion, where a user's running their own node and it's in like a centralized cloud provider. Or you can have users like some of us who are running Umbrals at home, and they have a node at home and they're running their own. So it supports. What's kind of nice about something decentralized is it's very easy to centralize something that's decentralized. It's just hard to decentralize something that's centralized. So, once you have something that's truly decentralized, like sliding the scale back to more centralization, is pretty easy.
That's a good way of putting it. I'm fascinated by this idea of like nodes as like personal servers.
Yeah.
And being able to like take control of all your information and data and payments. What do you think nodes will look like 5-10 years from now? Like, are they going to be these little like Raspberry Pi Umbral things? Are they going to be hosted nodes? Are they going to be with voltage? Are they going to be different hardware solutions? Are they going to be like, could they be like an entirely new device? Could they be a phone? What will a node look like 5-10 years from now?
I mean, I think if you kind of pile up all of the technological trends together and you kind of try to think about this, I think it does end up looking more like a phone. Like our phone is actually I imagine a future where there's a Bitcoin full node running on my phone, and it does all of my payments and stuff. And all I have to do is say, export a DID wallet and import it on another device, and everything that was on that phone is now on the other device, and I can do this as many times as I need to. That's kind of how I imagine the future is. Our devices get more and more powerful, and they have more and more storage, and they're better connected to the internet. We get something like Starlink, or maybe our cell towers get even better, and we're on 8G or something, and then like all of these things get unlocked that are currently kind of limited by our technological constraints, and especially if we are being sensitive to like device needs and costs, like we are in Bitcoin in terms of keeping block size small and making it very cheap and easy for people to run nodes. Like at some point, technologically will outpace to a significant degree the rate at which Bitcoin blocks or Bitcoin's like data requirements are, and Bitcoin is always getting more efficient in certain ways too. Like we're sending few and few messages between nodes because we have like certain optimizations and things like that. So I think that's kind of the future that I see, is like almost like a node on every device that is like reasonable, that is in your possession. You have complete control of your data, but there's a lot of things to get there, you know, more so than just like hardware improving. You also need like our software sophistication to improve in terms of like syncing between these devices, and you begin to need things like DIDs, I think, to really be able to do this sort of thing. But that's where I hope it goes. But that's also it seems like a lot of us want that to exist, so it probably will. You know, the date, I don't know when.
Mm-hmm. It does seem like we're headed in that direction. Like the next iteration of the web is people owning more of their data and just sorting that either on a node or I just recently saw Impervious announce their kind of technical specs for their upcoming browser. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that.
Yeah, I did.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and what you think of that first attempt at building a kind of Web3 browser Bitcoin. I don't know if that's the term they want to use, but another version of a browser that is kind of beyond the reaches of Google and Facebook and Amazon. What do you think of that technical spec doc they released?
I mean, I think it's awesome. I think it's very ambitious, and I think it's certainly a step in this direction that we're talking about. I think there are going to be some interesting problems there. Like one of the things I was discussing with David King, who was an investor in Stacker News, was the fact that some of the technology that they're talking about in that blog post requires your counterparty, or like the person you're doing a Zoom call with. They say, you know, Zoom, but without Zoom, you know, chat, but without Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever. The difficulty there is kind of the adoption. Like I don't want my dad to have to download another browser when I want to have a conversation with him. So I wonder how they're going to solve some of those problems. But if they can solve those problems as a Bitcoiner, I mean, even if they don't solve some of these problems as a Bitcoiner, I'm definitely going to be using a product like that. But I see that product that it's kind of exactly what we were talking about, where like more devices are going to become Bitcoin enabled and become like able to do things on Bitcoin and do more decentralized things. I told I told Anthony, who's one of the employees at Impervious, that I see this thing as potentially like an Umbrel competitor, actually, where it does a lot of the things that you want to do in Umbrel, because you're accessing Umbrel through your browser anyway. Like you're already using another device to access it, so why shouldn't that just all be like why shouldn't it all be in the browser? It has some issues like in terms of receiving a Lightning payment if your browser isn't open, say. But there are like solutions to these things that are getting worked out, like Lightning Signer is something that some people are working on. And if you're familiar with Greenlight at all and what they're doing at Blockstream, basically they run a node for you and you hold your keys. You hold the keys that allow you to transact on the Lightning network. So they do all of like the infrastructure and they make sure your node is like running and it's live and can receive payments. And you only really need to participate if you're like receiving or sending a payment, or you're like forwarding payments if you're a routing node. You wouldn't use one of these things probably for a routing node. But in these cases, like something, if that begins working really well, you can have a browser. You could replace an Umbrel with a browser. It becomes very competitive, I think, with Umbrel. And so I think it's a very exciting product, and I think that speaks to like the kind of general direction that we'll be going with a lot of like the software and stuff that will be built around and using Bitcoin. Yeah,
it's a very, very cool idea with a lot of implications. My head gets confused just thinking about all the possibilities. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about kind of the state of Stacker News right now, and let's kind of because I don't think people realize how quickly some of the Lightning apps are kind of being built out and finding product market fit. And I want to give people a better idea of Stacker News' like trajectory so far, because it's been a pretty incredible like first 6 months. You launched, when did you launch? July 2021?
Yeah, June, July, I think.
And in the first month, what was going on in that first month? Do you remember any of the metrics of like users and payments and, you know, how many people were upvoting comments?
Yeah, so I actually just built, because I'm doing my first investor update today, I built like a dashboard that has like all of this like graphed out. But in that first month, we had 58 monthly registrations, so people like creating accounts on Stacker News. And this last month, we had 286 registrations that month. And then I have like another couple of graphs here. The like number of posts and comments that were posted in that first month were 148. And then this last month, we had about 2,300 posts and comments. Monthly active users, 23 when we first launched that first month. Monthly active users being users who are signed in and like participating on the site. And this most recent month, we had 184. The SAT spend on the site went from a low of 615 when we first launched to a high last month of 122,000.
That's crazy.
SATs.
So 615 sats were spent by users in the first month of operation.
Yeah.
And what was the last month? 120,000?
Yeah, that was actually December. It dipped a little bit in January, I think, because we didn't have an AMA. We'll be having another one this week sometime with an even bigger guest. Yeah, it was 122,000 in December. So we have like 13. We have almost 1,400 users. We've had almost like 10,000 total post comments. I mean, it's growing really well. Page views are up. Let me see if I can get that. The total page views. So this last month we had almost 50,000 page views, which is up 26% over the prior month. We had an increase in like the unique number of visitors, not just the number of page views they had. We were up 4%. Let's see if I can have some other metrics here. But it's growing. I mean, that's just kind of what's nice to see is people are using it more and more people are coming. And it's really exciting. That's kind of, that's what you want. That's what you're looking for. Right.
It seems like also, like, I don't think I was there from day one, but I can't remember which month I signed up, a couple months ago. I noticed back then, it was kind of just, it felt like it was me, it was you, there was like a handful of other users. I recognized their names that are like at symbols. And it felt like it was so young and so, like it was not yet fully sustainable. It was like you guys were bootstrapping it, and there was this like small group of people helping out and trying to like almost doing it just out of like goodwill or to like get it going. And lately I've noticed that it's switched a bit. It's more new users that I've never seen before. I see different tags and I see different people commenting and posting. I'm getting a lot more upvotes, and I'm earning more sats for things that I post and comment. And so I guess I wonder how far along do you think Stacker News is to becoming a sustainable community that kind of lives on its own, right? Because like you started it, you got the wheel rolling. How much further do you have to get that wheel rolling? And I don't know if it's a user number or if it's a page view number or whatever it is, but how long is it going to take, or when does that moment happen where the community starts to like push the wheel itself and you no longer have to be there to kind of like push the network along and grow it?
Yeah, I mean, the metric I've been thinking about since the very early days, like later last year when people began asking me to decentralize it, is I'm like, I don't think the product really does the wheel doesn't turn itself until we have about 1,000 active users a day. So, and that can be also like lurking users, maybe users who aren't really participating necessarily, but that, so maybe that's like 1,000 visitors a day. So people feel like there are about 1,000 people somehow engaging with their content. And that, given the way growth is right now, that's probably something like 500 active users, like people who are actually engaging with the content, sharing new content, commenting, that kind of thing. So I think we're about like halfway there, like a little less than halfway there right now. But that's when I've already stopped having to spend 2 hours a day like discovering news myself to share, and I can just do it a little more freely than I would before because other users are doing a better job than I could do alone. So I think that'll just continue to increase more and more. And then my personal role is more like making sure the good users are rewarded well, the bad users, aren't rewarded, and that's more like a technological solution than kind of a more community leader role. And that's kind of the way I see it maybe progressing.
Okay, so in the next 6-12 months on the Stacker News roadmap, what are some of the items you're most excited about? Any specific features or launches that you're working on? I know you're always doing something new. It seems like every few weeks you've got an update rolling out. What are you most excited about?
I think figuring out the first sub is really exciting. So we've been discussing that like with users, with some of the investors. We have your idea competing, the job board competing with a few other ones. Like I'm one of the ideas that I want. And these aren't mutually exclusive necessarily. It's just in terms of like prioritization when they get done. One of the ideas that I kind of like is archiving the mailing lists, because mailing lists are structured like a tree, kind of like our discussions are. And the way I find mailing list stuff now is I either have to be really on top of my like email and see all of them. There's tons of posts to get in there all the time. And if I want to go back through the archives, there's no real great way for me to do that. I can do like a Google search, but it's not great, the UX around it. So that's a potential sub. The job board is a potential sub, which is appealing for obvious reasons because it's actually a revenue generator, and we can do some really interesting things for users by having that. Another angel wants us to support like value for value podcasts a little more directly, at least in terms of discoverability, and like be a place for comments on value for value podcasts. That potentially another sub. I mean, there are lots of things to still be done. Like we don't have media support right now. Users are kind of hacking media support by using Markdown and hosting on Imager, and they don't need to do that. I can easily integrate, images and videos and things like that. And there are a number of like UX UI things. Like a lot of users complained about the font being too small or the contrast being too low on the font in certain contexts and dark mode, etc. So like I'm really excited about getting that core experience for the user much better. Yeah, it's just like these are kind of all the things that are like circulating right now in terms of ideas, and how do I prioritize them is what I'm thinking. But yeah, I try to ship as much stuff as I possibly can, like as humanly possible for me to do, because I know one thing I've heard just over and over and over again by some of like, I don't know, the gurus in like startup land is like shipping cadence is like the best predictor of success. So that's something I just think about all the time. Is like, am I delivering a better and better experience for my users, more and more value for them on a regular basis? And yeah, it's so. However, I'm just going to keep doing that, and maybe some of these features are part of that.
Yeah. I mean, so far it's the site has grown and become a much cleaner experience, and I've seen the improvement over the last couple of months. So I'm excited about the next kind of 6-12 months and watching what it develops into. For any listeners who have not tried Stacker News yet, where can they go to find out more about you, try Stacker News, if they need to set up a Lightning wallet, and if they need to get a Lightning address? Talk to me about how a new user who's listening to this can get set up.
Yeah, so you can find Stacker News at stacker.news. You can also just Google Stacker News, and we should come up in the top there. But stacker.news. We're on Twitter at stacker_news. And then on stacker.news, in the footer at the very bottom, there's a link to my Twitter. It's K00BIDEH. It's Kubadeh. It's like this Persian meat dish that I'm really fond of, but with 2 zeros instead of O's. In terms of getting set up, right now you can just create an account, and you have 2 free posts, 2 free comments, and you can earn sats from that. If Kevin tells me when he releases this, I'll also put if you DM me on Twitter, I'll send you an invite link that has sats already in it, so you can get an account that already has sats in it. I won't post that publicly because I've had a user recently game an invite links that I've been sharing publicly, which is like a good Bitcoiner. He's responding to incentives and draining all of my invite faucets. But if you reach out to me on Twitter and you don't seem like a scammer, I'll make sure you can get an account with some sats in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time today. Great conversation, and I'm super excited about all this new stuff you're building, the web of trust, watching the community grow, the revenue generating ideas for the different subs. Really exciting time. So thanks for taking time out of your day, and hope we can chat again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Welcome to the Lightning Round presented by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Many of the apps and services you already use in the Bitcoin and Lightning ecosystem already use Voltage to scale their business quickly and easily without any maintenance. Voltage also offers an inbound liquidity product called Flow that helps you as a node operator get inbound liquidity quickly and easily. Overall, Voltage is creating the industry standard of non-custodial products, helping brands and startups and entrepreneurs scale. To learn more about Voltage, visit voltage.cloud. All right, time to get into the lightning round. In the last couple of days, 4 people sent in sats, comments, and questions over the Lightning Network using a Lightning podcasting app. Thank you all for sending in sats, comments, and questions. First up, Mary Oscar sent in 2,600 sats and left a comment that just says, testing. Thank you, Mary Oscar. Next up, we had an anonymous user sent in 843 sats. They did not leave a comment or question. So anonymous user, thank you for the sats. We had BTC Rich sent in 297 sats. Thank you, BTC Rich. Again, no comment, no question. And then finally, we had Raven. And Raven sent in 21 sats and asked, who's your favorite guest you would like on the podcast? That's a great question. I have a lot of guests I'd like to have on the podcast. A few that come to top of mind would be, I'd love to talk to someone at Cash App or Blocks, Square, Spiral, whatever you want to call that entity. Of course, I would love to have that be Jack Dorsey. Maybe that's not realistic today, but that's kind of a dream guest for the show. I think he'd be a really great guest to have on. Would love to talk to some of the folks working at Stripe and Visa and talk about what they're doing to kind of embrace Lightning and whether this is on their radar or not. I really enjoy talking, obviously, to a lot of the Lightning founders. I'd really like to get everyone on, anyone building a Lightning company. I would love to have on to kind of discuss what they're building. It helps me learn a lot about how the whole space is evolving. I feel like listeners are learning a ton from this exposure coming from all these different startup founders who can now share their story. So yeah, I'd start with some of the big payment companies. I think would be really interesting. Those would be my picks, I think. Thank you for sending in the question, Raven. And Raven also sent in a Lightning address. Last episode, I said I'm giving away 1,600 sats to anyone who sends in a comment with their Lightning address in it. Raven was the only one to do it. So Raven, you are getting 1,600 sats. You also won 1,500 sats in the previous episode. So Raven's 2 for 2. Nice work there. We have a third giveaway happening in this episode. I'm giving away 1,700 sats because this is episode number 17. If you would like to be eligible for this giveaway, you can leave a comment on this episode using a Lightning podcasting app. Fountain's my favorite, but there are many of them. Load your wallet with a few sats, leave a comment, make sure to include your Lightning address or your Twitter handle or some way for me to reach out to you because I can't currently pay directly within Fountain. And in next episode, so episode 18, I will announce who won the 1,700 sats. Can't wait to see all your questions and comments, and see you next week.